The invitation to the annual Rivera family gathering sat untouched on my Italian marble kitchen counter, the elegant gold script reflecting under the soft lighting of my Manhattan penthouse. After 10 years of calculated distance, deliberate invisibility, and quiet accumulation, it was all about to unravel, not because I wanted it to, but because success has a way of refusing to stay hidden forever. I glanced at my phone, rereading the headline that changed everything. Forbes 40 under 40, Sofia Rivera's tech empire valued at $3.8 billion. The article would drop tomorrow, just 3 days before the family reunion. So much for staying under the radar. Ms. Rivera, your sister Carmen is on line 1. Again. My assistant's voice came through the intercom, the slight exasperation not lost on me. Carmen had been calling relentlessly since the press release went out to select media outlets yesterday. I sighed, picking up the sleek phone. Hi, Carmen. What the hell, Sophia? Her voice erupted through the speaker. I just got off a call with Bloomberg. They asked me how it feels to be the sister of a tech billionaire. You want to explain something to me? I gazed out at the Manhattan skyline from my floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the afternoon light cast shadows between skyscrapers. Guess you'll find out with everyone else. Cut the crap, her voice sharpened. You let us believe you were struggling for years. Mom and Dad thought you were one bad month away from moving back home. Worried, were they? I said, half laughing. You mean all those lectures about wasting my potential? The sarcasm? The helpful suggestions to go work for Dad's law firm? They were just trying to help. No, they were trying to guide you, Carmen shot back, always the defender of our parents. Carmen, the golden child. Stanford MBA. Joined Dad's prestigious firm at 26. Never questioned the well-worn path laid before her. How long? She finally asked, her voice quieter. I walked across the polished hardwood floors to my balcony, watching as one of my drivers pulled my everyday Tesla into the private underground garage below. The one I drove to family events, not the Lamborghini or the custom rolls that stayed hidden. Remember when I moved into that tiny studio in Brooklyn after quitting Dad's firm? I asked. Carmen paused. Yeah, when you started that app development thing. That was 10 years ago. She didn't say anything else and she didn't have to. That's right, I continued, unable to keep the smirk from my voice. Everyone thought I was insane for walking away from a law career to play with computers, as Dad used to say. But what none of you knew was that I'd already sold my first security app for $800,000. $800,000? Carmen sounded stunned. Yep. And 6 months later, I secured venture capital funding for $3 million. I leaned against the railing, feeling the cool spring air against my face. By the time Dad was announcing over Thanksgiving dinner how I was just going through a phase, I had already crossed the 8-figure mark. I could picture Carmen now, eyes squinting, doing the mental calculations. But you still borrowed money from Mom and Dad for rent, she stammered. You drive that basic Tesla. You wear the same clothes for years. I actually laughed out loud. I never borrowed money, Carmen. I asked them to invest in my company. They refused. Loudly. And that Tesla? The clothes? All choices, just like this Manhattan penthouse in the Gulfstream G650 parked at a private hangar in Teterboro. Private jet, she whispered, voice cracking. How rich are you exactly? I thought back to all those family dinners where I was the invisible one. The sweet but struggling sibling. My younger brother Miguel used to theatrically grab the bill, sighing about how tough things must be for me. Forbes will print $3.8 billion, I said calmly, but that's conservative. The real figure is closer to 5. The sound Carmen made was somewhere between a gasp and a choke. I've got to jump into a board meeting, I added casually. See you at the reunion. Click. I turned toward the intercom. Diana, is everything ready? Yes, Ms. Rivera, she replied. Jet is fueled. The fleet of cars is scheduled to pick up each family member. The venue has been secured. Private estate confirmed and all NDAs are signed. Perfect. I picked up the reunion invitation again. For 10 years I'd let them box me in, the weird one, the dreamer, the financial disappointment. But this time they'd see the real me. My phone buzzed. Miguel, OMG Sophia, this Forbes thing. Tell me it's a joke. What's going on? I smiled and left him on read. Funny how the quiet ones always surprise them. Miguel, who loved to brag about his startup while dismissing my little apps as hobbies. The intercom buzzed again. Ms. Rivera, both your parents are online too. I didn't miss a beat. Tell them I'm in a meeting. I glanced at my watch. And Diana, call the helipad. I think I'll take the chopper to the board meeting today. As I gathered my things, tablet, sunglasses, notes for my next acquisition, my mind drifted back to the day everything changed. The day I decided to keep my success a secret. 10 years earlier, I sat at the ornate dining table in my parents' Upper East Side apartment, trying to explain a vision they had no interest in understanding. App development isn't a real career, Sophia, Dad had scoffed, swirling his expensive scotch. And this cybersecurity thing? It's already oversaturated. No one needs another firewall program. I was 25, fresh out of Columbia Law, sitting at Sunday dinner trying to explain why I was walking away from a job at his firm. You're throwing away everything we built for you, he continued sharply. Either you come work at the firm like we planned, or you're on your own. No support, no safety net. My mother gave me her patented pitying smile, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Honey, we're just worried. You need structure, something stable. A real career. I looked around the table, Dad's stern glare, Mom's polite condescension, Carmen's silence, and Miguel's smirk. That was the moment. I didn't tell them about the $800,000 check sitting in my bank account, or about the 3 major tech companies already courting me, or about the venture capital firms emailing me daily. You're right, I said, standing. I'll figure it out on my own. 2 weeks later, I moved into a shoebox studio in Brooklyn. They assumed I was broke, too stubborn to ask for help. But I was quietly building a digital empire. Year 1 was brutal, 18-hour days, coding, networking, sleepless ambition. My first major security platform, ShieldWall, was acquired 6 months after launch. Total earnings, $4.3 million. I reinvested every cent, hired developers, built better platforms, revolutionized how companies protected their data. But every time I visited home, same Tesla, simple clothes, quiet smile. Let me help with rent, Sophia, Mom would say. No thanks, I'd reply. I'm doing just fine. And I was more than fine. By the end of that first year, my net worth had crossed $15 million. By year 3, I'd quietly passed $100 million. But to my family, I was still just Sophia, the idealistic sister who wasted her potential. Now, 10 years later, as I stepped into my private helicopter on the roof of my Manhattan building, I thought about how that little white lie had grown into a billion-dollar secret. And in 3 days, everything would change. My phone buzzed again. A text from Dad, we need to talk. I smirked and turned off the phone. He'd have to wait. After 10 years of condescending comments and backhanded concern, they were finally about to learn the truth. And I was going to make sure they never forgot it. The Forbes article dropped at exactly 6 a.m. I was already awake, espresso in hand, laptop open in my sleek home office, a wall of monitors lighting up with chaos in real time. Security titan, how Sofia Rivera quietly built a $3.8 billion empire without anyone noticing. Right under the headline, a photo I personally approved, me in front of my headquarters wearing a custom Armani outfit worth more than Carmen's monthly salary. The article didn't just reveal my wealth, it mapped out the empire I'd built in silence. The security platforms, the acquisitions, the revolutionary encryption algorithms, the fact that over 70% of Fortune 500 companies now use my software. My phone erupted. Miguel, wait, is this real? $3.8 billion. Carmen, I knew something was up yesterday. Mom, Sophia, sweetheart, please call me Dad. This has to be a mistake or exaggeration. Aunt Gloria, is our Sophia the Sophia Rivera? I muted the chat and checked my inbox, dozens of interview requests, investment pitches, speaking invitations. But one email stood out, from my father's longtime legal partner, Richard Winters. Sophia, I believe there may be strategic value in exploring synergies between Rivera Security and Winters and Rivera Law. I understand your father may have had past reservations, but I assure you we're open to evolving. I actually laughed out loud. 3 years ago, I pitched them a specialized legal tech platform. Richard looked me dead in the eye and said, "We don't gamble on unproven digital solutions." My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Rivera, your mother is in the lobby. She's quite insistent." I pulled up the security feed. There she was, Elena Rivera, impeccable as ever in her tailored Chanel, arguing with security like her life depended on it. Let her up, I sighed. Time to face the first ripple of the storm. 10 minutes later, my mother stood frozen in my penthouse entryway, overlooking Central Park, morning sunlight pouring through glass walls, and a Basquiat original hanging behind me worth more than my parents' entire apartment. "Sophia," my mother whispered, her voice shaking as she stepped fully into the space. What is all this?" This is my real home, Mom, I said calmly, handing her a cup of espresso from my Italian machine. Not the modest little apartment in Brooklyn I keep for family visits. She wandered toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, her heels echoing against the marble floors. But how? When? How long have you been living like this? 10 years, I replied, leaning against the kitchen island. Since the night you and Dad said app development was just a phase, something no respectable Rivera would pursue. She turned slowly, her perfectly made-up face now clouded with confusion and something else I couldn't quite place. But we saw you struggling. The tiny apartment. That basic car. Asking for help with bills. I gave a dry smile. I never asked for bill help. I asked you both to invest in my company. There's a difference. I gestured around me. And the apartment, the car, they're all part of the illusion. I played the role you believed in, the broke dreamer, the lost one. That was the only version of me you ever accepted. Her lips parted in disbelief. You lied to us, Sophia. For 10 years. No, I said quietly. I just didn't correct the story you all chose to believe. You were so sure I was failing, you never looked deeper. She sank slowly into one of my custom leather chairs, her posture collapsing. For the first time in years, she looked vulnerable. Does anyone else know? Just Carmen, I said. She found out when the press release went out. I think she tried to warn you. She nodded. She called your father, said it must be a mistake, some other Sofia Rivera. I walked to my desk and handed her a folder. Here's the proposal I gave Dad 3 years ago. If he'd invested the $2 million I asked for, his share would be worth over $80 million today. Her hands trembled. He said you were looking for a handout, she whispered. That your tech experiments have failed. And you believed him. I didn't ask it as a question. Did any of you ever research my company? Google my name? Anything? Nothing. She didn't answer. I turned back to the window, watching the city buzz below. The family reunion's still on, by the way. But I changed the location. I bought out the entire Hudson Valley estate. Everyone will be picked up by cars from my fleet, flown on my jet, and will be celebrating at my private compound. Your compound, my mother echoed, voice barely above a whisper. In the Hudson Valley, I said casually. I bought it last year after closing my first billion-dollar deal. I turned to face her fully. And Mom, this time I won't be the quiet one sitting through dinner while everyone lists their promotions and summer home renovations. I've got some things to share too. She stood up slowly, smoothing her silk skirt with trembling hands. Your father, when he sees all of this. Her voice faltered. He'll have no choice but to admit it, I finished for her. That his daughter, his impractical daughter, built something bigger than anything in the Rivera legacy. I smiled gently. And Mom, that's just the beginning. I walked her to the elevator, pausing just before the doors opened. Oh, and one more thing. Remember that townhouse on Gramercy Park you've always wanted? The one Dad says is an unnecessary extravagance. She looked at me puzzled. I bought the entire block last month, I said with a shrug. Just because I could. The door slid closed on her stunned expression. As soon as she was gone, I hit the intercom. Diana, is everything in place for the reunion? Yes, Ms. Rivera, she replied smoothly. Estate staff are fully briefed. Each guest will receive a personalized folder documenting every investment opportunity they declined over the years, along with current valuations. The video timeline of your achievements is finalized and queued for the welcome dinner. Excellent. I picked up my phone, opened the family group chat, and typed a single message. Looking forward to seeing everyone at the reunion. Dress appropriately for a private estate. Transportation will be provided. Then I refreshed the stock dashboard on my laptop. My company's value had surged since the Forbes article hit, another $400 million added to my net worth before noon. I thought of my father probably in his office right now, trying to process how the daughter he dismissed had quietly become one of the wealthiest women in America. I thought of Miguel, still bragging about his 6-figure salary in Hampton's timeshare, blissfully unaware I could buy his entire life with a day's interest. This reunion, it was going to be unforgettable. My phone buzzed again. A message from Dad. We need to talk before the reunion. Some things are better discussed privately. I typed back. Everything will be discussed at the reunion, Dad. Isn't that what reunions are for? Sharing our accomplishments. Then I called Diana once more. Have the design team repaint the helipad. Make sure my logo is clearly visible from the air. It's already done, Ms. Rivera. Anything else? I paused, thinking of 10 years of pity, mockery, and being branded the family disappointment. Yes. Have the Forbes article framed and hung in every room on the estate. I want it to be the first thing they see no matter where they turn. As I ended the call, I caught my reflection in the glass, calm, confident, wealthy beyond imagination, and finally ready to show them all who I really was. The countdown was over. The morning of the Rivera family reunion arrived crisp and clear. I stood on the private landing pad of my Hudson Valley estate, watching as 3 black Escalades pulled in, one after another. They had arrived. The doors opened. First came my father, still commanding, still sharp-eyed, but his confidence dimmed. My mother followed, more subdued than usual after our conversation days earlier. Carmen, Miguel, and a wave of aunts, uncles, and cousins trailed behind, their faces full of disbelief and poorly concealed curiosity. And there, waiting for them in the center of it all, sat my helicopter. Sleek, midnight blue Rivera security emblazoned in silver along the side. "Welcome, everyone," I said, letting my voice carry. "Hope the ride was comfortable." "Sophia," my father said, stepping forward, trying to reclaim his usual authority, "this is a bit much. The usual venue would have been just fine." I smiled. "The country club was too public, Dad. This reunion needed to be more meaningful." "On your estate," Miguel muttered, clutching his weekend bag like a lifeline. "Of course you have an estate." As they entered the main house, I watched their eyes shift, soaking in the soaring ceilings, the museum-quality art, the views of the private lake. "Is that a real Warhol?" Aunt Lucia whispered, pointing to the piece hanging in the foyer. "Yes," I replied. "Picked it up last year." My father cleared his throat. "Sophia, maybe we should talk." "We will over dinner," I said, gesturing for the staff to show everyone to their rooms. "Until then, enjoy the amenities. The spa treatments are complimentary." He flinched. "Perfect." 2 hours later, we gathered in the main dining hall, a glass-walled space overlooking manicured gardens and the shimmering lake beyond. The long table sparkled with crystal and silver, place settings worth more than most cars. And on every wall, the Forbes article, framed, backlit, impossible to ignore. They entered slowly, all pretense of confidence fading. Even their designer outfits looked oddly out of place here. "Please have a seat," I said warmly. "We have quite a bit to talk about." "Sophia," Dad began, attempting diplomacy, "I think I speak for all of us when I say we're surprised." "Surprised?" I repeated with a soft laugh. "Not angry that I kept this from you? Not disappointed I didn't share the truth? Just surprised." "We didn't know," Mom murmured. "No," I corrected her. "You didn't want to know. Every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject. Every time I offered you a seat at the table, you dismissed me." "But the apartment," Miguel said, voice small. "The Tesla. The times I picked up the check because I thought, because you thought I was broke, I finished for him. Did you enjoy that, Miguel? Being the successful brother? The savior?" He looked down, cheeks flushed. At least he had the decency to look ashamed. "Let me show you something," I said calmly, pressing a discreet button on the side of the dining table. Motorized panels opened overhead, and high-resolution screens descended. A timeline appeared, juxtaposing milestones in my journey with the words they'd used to dismiss me. 2015, "This app thing is a waste of your law degree." Dad result, "My first security platform sells for $4.3 million. 2016, "Sophia, you need a stable career." Mom result, "Company valuation hits $22 million. 2018, "At least one of us is making the family proud." Miguel result, "I close a $60 million acquisition deal with a major tech firm." 2020, "Tech security is going to burst like every bubble." Carmen result, "My company crosses 10,000 enterprise clients and $1.2 billion in annual recurring revenue." 2022, "We don't fund digital startups." Dad's firm result, "Company valuation surpasses $2.8 billion. Every single comment I said, my voice steady. Every time you looked at me like I was chasing a fantasy, I remembered all of it. And I used it. My father swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you never wanted to hear it," I said. "You needed to learn that success doesn't wear a law degree. It doesn't follow your playbook. And sometimes the person you underestimate changes everything." I walked to the edge of the room, glass walls framing the sunset over the mountains. "The hardest part wasn't keeping secrets," I continued. "It was watching you all celebrate each other while I was building something you couldn't see." "We were wrong," my father said through gritted teeth. "Yes," I said simply. "You played it safe. That was your ceiling. Mine was higher." I turned to Miguel. "You flaunted your startup funding like it was revolutionary. I raised that during a coffee break. Dad stood. Enough. We were wrong, okay? No, I said firmly. I don't want an apology. I want you to understand. I pressed another button. The screen shifted, revealing the prototype of my latest creation. This launches next month. A redefinition of how AI security is implemented across industries. Estimated worth $6 billion. I looked at them all. This time, you'll see it happen with your own eyes. No more doubting. The room fell into a deep silence, the kind that only comes when illusions finally collapse. My family sat frozen, absorbing the reality they had ignored for so long. Finally, my mother spoke. We're proud of you, Sophia. We should have been proud all along. Thank you, Mom, I said gently. But I didn't do this for your pride. I did it because it was my dream. My vision. I looked around at the opulence they now couldn't deny. And now it's my empire. So what happens now? Carmen asked quietly. Now? I echoed, pouring myself a glass of wine. Now we have dinner as a family. But this time we'll do it my way. No more pretending. No more hiding. I raised my glass. To the truth. Finally. One by one, they lifted their glasses. The shock hadn't fully worn off, but something was shifting. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of gourmet cuisine, aged wine, and hesitant but warming conversation. For the first time in 10 years, they weren't just seeing me, they were really seeing me. When they finally retired to their suites, I stayed behind, watching moonlight dance across the lake. Diana appeared beside me, her voice soft. Was it worth it? I thought back to the timeline, their stunned expressions, the respect they never used to show. Yes, I said. But not for the reasons I thought. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about finally being free. Fully myself. I smiled. And tomorrow we show them the future. Their world of law firms, corporate ladders, and conservative choices was fading. The world I'd built, innovative, revolutionary, transformative, was just beginning. Later that night, I found a note slipped under my door, my father's handwriting. I was wrong. Not just about your business, about everything. You didn't just succeed. You changed the game. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Dad. I placed it in a frame beside the receipt from my first app sale, $800,000. A reminder of where it began. The next morning, as my family gathered for breakfast, attitude softened, curiosity blooming, I realized something profound. Success isn't just about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the sweetest victory isn't loud. It's in quietly knowing you built something extraordinary while the world was busy doubting you. My phone buzzed, breaking the moment. Revera Security announces revolutionary new AI platform. The future had arrived. And this time they'd be watching it unfold. No more hiding. No more pretending. Just success on my terms. While my family recovered from the revelations of the previous night, I took Carmen and Miguel on a virtual tour of what I'd built over the past decade, the infrastructure behind the billions that had stunned them into silence. This is our main security operations center, I explained as the three-dimensional holographic display lit up my private office. 24-hour monitoring of client systems across 6 continents. Carmen stared at the visualization, her legal mind clearly trying to process the scale. How many employees do you have? Just over 3,000 worldwide, I replied, swiping to show our global footprint. Offices in 14 countries. Research labs in 3. Miguel leaned forward, his startup founder eyes wide with disbelief. And you built all this, alone? No co-founders. I allowed myself a small smile. I learned early that partners want compromise. I wanted excellence. The holographic display shifted to show the evolution of my security platforms, from the first rudimentary firewall system to the current quantum encrypted solutions that had governments and corporations alike banging on my door. That first year, I continued, leading them through my journey. I slept maybe 4 hours a night. Lived on instant ramen and determination. Coded 18 hours straight some days. While we thought you were struggling to make rent, Carmen murmured, guilt flashing across her face. That was the narrative you were comfortable with, I replied without malice. The struggling artist's sister was easier to handle than someone who might actually outshine the golden children. Miguel winced. We weren't trying to. Intentions don't matter, I interrupted gently. Results do. First lesson of business. I flicked my wrist, changing the display to show my first major acquisition, a struggling encryption startup I'd purchased for $8 million and transformed into a cornerstone of my security suite. This was the turning point. Year 3. When I realized I could build or buy whatever I needed. No investors telling me to slow down or scale back. Carmen was studying me with new eyes. You really never needed our help, did you? I needed your belief, I said quietly, meeting her gaze. Not your money. The moment hung between us. 10 years of misunderstandings crystallized in 6 words. I cleared my display with a wave. And now I'd like to show you something nobody outside the company has seen. The hologram transformed into an intricate web of connections, glowing blue threads linking nodes across a virtual globe. Project Athena, I explained. The future of cybersecurity. Self-evolving defense systems that predict attacks before they happen. Miguel whistled low. That's not just security software. That's practically sentient. 4 years of development. $600 million in R&D. Launch date is 6 weeks from now. I turned to face them both fully. And I'm offering you both pre-IPO shares. Their heads snapped up in unison. Why? Carmen asked, suspicious. Because despite everything, you're still family, I said simply. And I want you to be part of what comes next. Carmen's legal training kicked in. What's the catch? I laughed, a genuine laugh. The catch is you have to admit I was right. Publicly? Miguel's brow furrowed. That's it. That's it. Well, and you have to finally come see what I actually do. Both of you. Real interest, not polite questions over holiday dinners. They exchanged a glance, the kind siblings perfect over decades of silent communication. I'd like that, Carmen said finally. To actually understand. Miguel nodded. Me too. I want to know the sister I apparently never knew. Good, I said, closing the holographic display. Because family dinners are about to get a lot more interesting. Later that afternoon, I found my father alone in the estate's library, studying the framed magazine covers featuring my company and me. Your mother and I had arguments about you, he said without turning around, sensing my presence. She wanted to push harder. Make you come home. I said you needed to learn your lesson. I moved beside him, looking at the evidence of my success that he'd never bothered to search for. And what lesson was that? I asked, not unkindly. He sighed, suddenly looking older than his 65 years. That the world is harsh. That dreams don't pay bills. That safety matters more than passion. I studied his profile, the man who had built his own version of success, who couldn't imagine a path different from his own. You were right about one thing, I offered. The world is harsh. But you were wrong about everything else. He turned to me finally. When did you know? That you'd succeeded, I mean. When did you look around and think I've made it? I considered the question seriously. There wasn't a single moment. Not the first million. Not the first billion. Success isn't a destination, Dad. It's waking up every day doing exactly what you were meant to do regardless of who believes in you. He nodded slowly. I never understood your work. Still don't, if I'm being honest. You never tried, I replied without heat. It was easier to dismiss than to learn. Fair enough. He gestured to the timeline displayed on one of the library's digital walls. This moment here, 2019. We told you to stop playing entrepreneur and come work at the firm. That same week, I signed a $400 million government contract. I finished for him. The largest cybersecurity deal in federal history at that time. And you said nothing. Would you have understood what it meant? I asked. Or would you have found a way to minimize it? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I'm not angry anymore, Dad, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. I'm just free. He placed a hand on my shoulder, tentative, unfamiliar with this new dynamic between us. Your grandfather, my father, did the same to me, you know. When I left his construction business to become a lawyer. Told me I was abandoning the family legacy. I looked at him with new understanding. And you proved him wrong. I did. A wry smile crossed his face. But it seems I learned the wrong lesson from that victory. Instead of encouraging you to find your own path, I tried to force you onto mine. We repeat what we know, I said softly. Perhaps. He straightened his shoulders. But it stops here. With us. I nodded. It stops here. Outside, I could see the rest of the family exploring the grounds, taking in the reality of what their struggling Sophia had built. The walls between us were still there, but now they had windows. It was a start. That evening, as the sun set over the Hudson Valley, I gathered everyone for cocktails on the main terrace. The atmosphere had shifted, less shock, more curiosity. Questions about my company were asked with genuine interest, not polite obligation. My cousin Marco, who had barely spoken to me in years, approached with an earnest expression. I just wanted to say, I applied for a job at your company last year. He looked sheepish. Used my mother's maiden name so you wouldn't know we were related. I blinked in surprise. You did. He nodded. Got rejected in the second round. Now I understand why. Your standards are. He gestured around at the evidence of my success. Obviously high. Which department? I asked, intrigued. Threat analysis. I have a background in behavioral psychology. I pulled out my phone, typing quickly. Apply again. Next week. Use your real name this time. He stared at me. Just like that? Nepotism after all this secrecy? I smiled. Not nepotism. You made it to the second round on your own merits. That's further than 80% of applicants. I'm just removing the artificial barrier. What happens next is up to you. His face lit up with genuine hope. Thank you. As he walked away, Carmen sidled up beside me. Look at you, connecting the family business after all. On my terms, I clarified. Merit first, family second. She clinked her glass against mine. To merit first. We watched the sunset together, sister to sister, the past receding like shadows as light found its way through the cracks we'd all created. And for the first time in a decade, I felt truly seen. Chapter 5, The True Cost of Silence. The morning of the third day, I woke before dawn, restless with thoughts I couldn't quiet. 10 years of secrecy had taken a toll I rarely acknowledged, not just on my family relationships but on me. I slipped out of my suite and walked the grounds as the first light crept over the horizon. The estate was quiet except for the occasional groundskeeper preparing for the day. You're up early. I turned to find my mother approaching along the garden path, wrapped in a cashmere shawl against the morning chill. I could say the same, I replied, surprised to see her. I don't sleep well in strange places, she admitted. Even billion-dollar strange places. We walked in silence for a moment, the tension between us not gone but transformed into something more contemplative. I want to ask you something, she finally said, stopping by the ornate fountain at the center of the rose garden. And I need you to be honest. Okay. She turned to face me fully. Were you happy these past 10 years? The question caught me off guard. Not about the money or the success or the deceit, but about happiness. I considered deflecting, but something in her eyes, a mother's intuition perhaps, made me pause. I was fulfilled, I answered carefully. Driven. Accomplished. That's not what I asked. I sighed, watching the first rays of sunlight dance across the fountain water. Parts of me were happy, I admitted. The entrepreneur. The innovator. The visionary. They thrived. I looked directly at her. But the daughter? The sister? The family member? They were lonely. My mother nodded slowly as if confirming something she had already suspected. Do you know why I really kept the secret for so long? I asked. To prove us wrong, she answered immediately. That was part of it, I acknowledged. But not all. In the beginning, yes, it was about showing Dad his limited vision was wrong. But after the first few years, after I'd already succeeded beyond anything you could imagine, I trailed off. Why then? She pressed gently. Because I was afraid, I confessed, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Afraid that if you all knew, if you saw what I'd built, you'd want to be part of it. Not because you believed in me, but because of what I had. And I couldn't bear the thought of never knowing if your pride was genuine or just opportunistic. My mother's eyes welled with tears. Oh, Sophia. Every million I made created another brick in the wall. Every achievement became another secret to keep. And somewhere along the way, I realized I'd trapped myself in a prison of my own success. We stood in silence, the weight of a decade's worth of misconnections hanging between us. Did you know, my mother finally said, that your father keeps a folder of every article he could find about you? Hidden in his desk at the office. I stared at her. What? She nodded. After the second year, when you stopped talking about your work, he got curious. Started researching. Found some industry publication that mentioned your first platform. He was puzzled. Then proud. Then hurt that you hadn't shared it. He never said anything, I whispered. And neither did you, she replied. Pride is a Rivera family trait, it seems. But the lectures, the suggestions to get a real job continued because you seemed to want them to, she said simply. You played the struggling daughter so convincingly, what were we supposed to think? The few times we tried to really understand, you changed the subject. I remembered those moments, deflecting questions about my work, keeping conversations superficial, reinforcing the narrative I'd created. Had I become so committed to my secret that I'd miss signs they might actually care? We made terrible mistakes with you, my mother continued. Dismissed your dreams, tried to force you onto a path that wasn't yours. For that I'll always be sorry. But the wall between us these past 10 years? that was built from both sides, Sophia. The truth of her words settled over me. I had been so focused on proving them wrong that I'd never considered they might have grown, changed, or wanted to understand. My secrecy had become not just a shield but a weapon, keeping them at arm's length while I silently judged their ignorance. I don't know how to be a daughter who isn't either failing or hiding anymore, I admitted. My mother took my hand, a gesture so simple yet so unfamiliar it made my chest ache. Then perhaps it's time we all learned how to be a family again. Not the Riveras before your success, not the Riveras of yesterday's revelations, but something new. Something true. As the morning light strengthened around us, illuminating the estate I'd built with my 10-year secret, I felt something shift inside me, not resolution, not yet, but possibility. I'd like that, I said quietly. She squeezed my hand once, then released it. Good. Now I believe you have one more surprise planned for everyone today. I smiled, appreciating her attempt to lighten the moment. I do. Something that might help bridge these new waters we're in. Then I look forward to it, she said. After all, you've proven to be quite good at surprises. By mid-morning, the rest of the family had gathered in the estate's gleaming conference room, a space I typically use for board meetings and strategic planning. The atmosphere was different today, less shock, more genuine curiosity about what I'd built. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing at the head of the table. Yesterday was about the past, about what I built while you weren't looking. But today is about the future. I activated the room's holographic display system. Above the table, a three-dimensional rendering of a gleaming campus appeared. This is the Rivera Innovation Center, I explained. Currently under construction just outside of Manhattan. It will be the global headquarters for Rivera Security and all its subsidiaries, but also something more. The display zoomed in to show different sections of the campus. The North Wing will house the Rivera Foundation, a $500 million philanthropic organization focused on providing technology education to underserved communities. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the room. The East Wing will be the Rivera Incubator, providing funding, mentorship, and resources to startups focused on security innovation. And this, I highlighted the central building, is the Rivera Family Trust. My father leaned forward. Family Trust. Yes, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. I've established a $300 million trust for the Rivera family. Not as handouts, but as investment capital. I watched their expressions shift from confusion to attention. Each family member will have access to venture funding for legitimate business ideas. Proper business plans will be required. Market viability will be assessed. Nothing is guaranteed except the opportunity. Carmen's legal mind was already working. Who controls the trust? A board of 5, I explained. Me, an independent financial advisor, and 3 family members selected by vote each year. Miguel's eyes widened. You're giving us access to your capital? After we spent years dismissing your ideas. I'm giving you access to opportunity, I corrected. The same opportunity one created for myself when none of you would. Because despite everything, family is still family. And Riveras should support Riveras, something I learned the hard way. My father stood slowly. Sophia, this is extraordinary. But why? Because breaking cycles matters more than holding grudges, I said simply. You tried to force me into your vision of success. I'm not going to make the same mistake by denying anyone else their chance. I looked around at the faces of my family, the people who had misunderstood me, underestimated me, but who were still, in the end, mine. 10 years of secrets taught me something important. Success in business without connection to what matters is hollow. I built an empire while losing my family. Now I'd like to try having both. The room fell quiet, the magnitude of what I was offering sinking in. Finally, my cousin Elena spoke up. I've been developing an AI-driven translation platform for medical communications. Would that qualify? I smiled. Pitch it properly to the board when it's established, and we'll see. One by one, ideas emerged that had been kept quiet, dreams that had seemed impossible, a sustainable fashion line from Aunt Lucia, an educational tech platform from Miguel. A legal tech innovation from Carmen that she'd been afraid to mention to her traditional-minded partners. As I listened to the vision and passion surfacing around the table, I realized they weren't so different from me after all. They just lacked the resources and confidence to break free from expectations. Applications for the first round of funding will open next month, I concluded. The trust goes live regardless of what happens between us personally. This isn't conditional on forgiveness or family harmony. It's simply the right thing to do with the resources I have. My father approached me as the meeting dispersed, his expression more open than I'd seen in years. You could have bought 10 estates with that money, he said quietly. Built another company. Acquired competitors. Instead, you're investing in the people who doubted you most. I learned from the best, I replied. A certain lawyer who once told me that true legacy isn't what you build, but what you enable others to build. Recognition flickered in his eyes, his own words from my childhood, long before the rift, when he still spoke of dreams and possibilities. I said that. You did. Before law became the only acceptable path. Before success had such a narrow definition. He nodded slowly. I forgot that part of myself somewhere along the way. Well, I said, it seems we're all getting reintroduced to parts of ourselves this weekend. As he walked away, Diana approached with my secure tablet. The markets are responding to yesterday's Forbes article, she reported. Stock is up 12% since opening. The board is requesting an emergency meeting to discuss the public relations strategy moving forward. The outside world was still spinning, still demanding attention. The empire hadn't stopped needing its emperor just because personal revelations were happening. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow afternoon, I instructed. And Diana? Make sure the family jet is ready to take everyone home whenever they wish. No pressure to stay if they're processing. Already arranged, Ms. Rivera. I watched my family disperse throughout the estate, some in pairs deep in conversation, others alone and thoughtful. 10 years of secrets had been unveiled in 3 days. Healing wouldn't happen overnight, but at least now it could happen in the light. Later that evening, as sunset painted the Hudson Valley in gold and crimson, I found myself alone on the main terrace. The weight of maintaining my facade had lifted, leaving behind a curious lightness and the uncertainty of who I would be now that my defining secret was gone. Room for one more? I turned to find Carmen approaching, 2 glasses of wine in hand. Always, I replied, accepting one. We stood in companionable silence, watching the day fade. You know, she finally said, I always wondered why you never seemed jealous of my success. The praise Dad heaped on me, Mom's pride in my career choices. You never seemed bothered. I smiled. Would you believe me if I said I was genuinely happy for you? After everything? No. I laughed, a real laugh. Fair enough. The truth is, I was secure in what I was building. And I knew something none of you did, that success comes in many forms, and the Rivera definition was too narrow by half. She nodded, sipping her wine. I've been so stressed, Sophia. For years. Trying to live up to expectations, make partner on schedule, marry the right person, buy in the right neighborhood. And now my little sister is a billionaire who charted her own course, and I'm wondering if I've been chasing the wrong dream all along. I turned to face her fully. That's not what I wanted, to make anyone doubt their choices. I know, she said simply. But seeing you like this, not just wealthy, but passionate about what you've built, it forces reflection. For what it's worth, I offered, I think you're brilliant at what you do. The problem was never your career choice. It was that it wasn't a choice at all. It was the path of least resistance. She considered this. Maybe I need to find my own path within the law. Something that feels like mine, not Dad's. The trust could help with that, I suggested. Your legal tech idea has real potential. She smiled tentatively. You think so? I know so. I've been watching that space for acquisition targets. 10 years, she mused. All this time you were watching everything, weren't you? From the shadows. I had to, I admitted. It was the only way to stay connected while keeping my distance. Well, she said, raising her glass, here's to no more shadows. Whatever comes next, good, bad, complicated, at least it will be real. I clinked my glass against hers. To real. As night fell over the estate, I realized that the reunion had become something none of us had anticipated, not just a revelation of my secret success, but the beginning of a new kind of family truth. One where masks were removed, expectations reconsidered, and possibilities expanded beyond the narrow confines we'd all accepted for too long. The empire I'd built in silence was finally visible. But perhaps the real achievement would be what we built next, together in the light. 1 year later. The private elevator whispered to a stop at the 50th floor of the newly completed Rivera Tower in downtown Manhattan. As the doors opened, I stepped into the executive reception area, the floor-to-ceiling glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city I'd conquered, one algorithm at a time. Good morning, Ms. Rivera, my new assistant greeted me. The quarterly family board meeting is set to begin in 30 minutes. Everyone has arrived. Thank you, Jacob. Any pressing matters before we start? Just the usual stack of acquisition offers, he replied with a knowing smile. And your father called. He wanted to confirm dinner tomorrow at his place. I nodded, still getting used to the casual rhythm of regular family dinners. No pretenses, no hidden successes, just the messy reality of people who were relearning how to be authentic with one another. Confirm, please. And let him know I'll bring the wine this time. As I made my way to my office, I caught glimpses of the company I'd built, hundreds of brilliant minds working on security solutions that protected everything from national infrastructure to personal data. The anonymity I'd cultivated for so long had been replaced by visibility, my face now recognizable in tech circles and beyond. It hadn't been an easy transition, from shadow CEO to public figure, from family disappointment to business icon. But nothing worthwhile ever came easily. That was a lesson the Riveras had finally learned. Sophia. Miguel's voice called out as I passed the innovation lab. He jogged to catch up, tablet in hand. You need to see this. We just got the first user data from the educational platform launch. The we wasn't lost on me. 6 months after the reunion revelation, Miguel had joined Rivera Security to head up our educational division. His startup expertise combined with my resources creating something neither of us could have built alone. How does it look? I asked, genuinely curious. His face broke into a grin. Adoption rates 43% above projections. Engagement metrics off the charts. The accessibility features you insisted on are making a huge difference in underserved communities. I scrolled through the data, noting the details with satisfaction. This is excellent work, Miguel. Really excellent. The pride in his eyes wasn't the desperate plea for validation I'd seen for years. It was earned confidence and the knowledge that his success wasn't diminished by mine. The board's going to be impressed, he said as we walked toward the conference room. The foundation initiatives are all exceeding expectations. The Rivera Family Trust had evolved beyond my initial vision, becoming a force for innovation within and beyond our family. Cousin Elena's medical translation platform was now in beta testing at 3 major hospital systems. Aunt Lucia's sustainable fashion line had secured additional venture funding after our initial investment. Even my father had found a new purpose, heading the legal strategy division of the foundation, his decades of expertise now directed toward expanding technology access and education rather than just accumulating billable hours. As we entered the boardroom, I took in the faces around the table, family members and independent advisors, all part of the new Rivera legacy we were building together. My mother sat near the head of the table reviewing quarterly reports with Carmen, who had left her father's firm to establish a legal tech practice of her own. Before we begin, I said once everyone was settled, I want to acknowledge that today marks exactly 1 year since our family reunion at the Hudson Valley estate. 1 year since the truth came out. Knowing smiles passed between family members who had lived through that weekend of revelations. I spent 10 years building in silence, I continued. Proving something to myself and yes, to all of you. But this past year of building together has taught me something important that I want to share. I placed my hands on the table, feeling the solid reality of where we'd arrived. Success in isolation is achievement, but success in connection is legacy. What we've accomplished this year, as individuals pursuing our own visions but supported by family, exceeds anything I built alone in the decade before. My father cleared his throat. I believe that's my cue for the first agenda item. He opened his folder. The Rivera Foundation's educational initiatives have now reached over 100,000 students across the country. Scholarship applications for next year have tripled. As he continued his report, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The hurt hadn't disappeared entirely. Decades of family dynamics don't resolve in a single year, but it had transformed into something constructive. The past was acknowledged rather than ignored, used as foundation rather than weapon. The meeting progressed through updates on various initiatives, investment performance, and strategic planning. Ideas flowed freely, challenges were addressed collaboratively, and the future took shape in ways none of us could have designed alone. When we adjourned 3 hours later, I remained in the conference room, watching the Manhattan skyline as afternoon light gilded the buildings. My mother joined me, standing silently by my side for a moment before speaking. I found something yesterday while organizing old photos, she said, placing a faded newspaper clipping on the table. Your first mention in print. Tech industry newsletter, about 11 years ago. I picked it up, surprised. It was a small feature on promising security startups my company mentioned in a single paragraph. You kept this? I asked. She nodded. Your father found it. Brought it home. We were confused because you'd never mentioned the company, just vague references to trying to make your app thing work. We thought maybe it was a different Sofia Rivera. Why didn't you ask me about it? We did in our way. That Sunday dinner, your father asked how your computer projects were going. You gave a vague answer about still figuring things out. I remembered that dinner, deliberately downplaying my progress, already committed to my secret path. We mishandled so much, she continued softly. But the silence became a habit on both sides, I think. It did, I acknowledged. Pride is expensive that way. She touched the clipping gently. I'm framing this for your father's birthday next month. The beginning of what you built, what led us here. After she left, I remained by the window, thinking about cycles broken and bridges rebuilt. The Forbes article that had shattered my secret life was now framed in the company museum alongside other milestones. No longer a declaration of independence, but simply one chapter in a longer story. My phone chimed with a message from Carmen. Reservation confirmed for family dinner Sunday. Miguel's bringing his new boyfriend. Dad's making paella. You're still bringing Elena to pitch to that VC, right? Such an ordinary message. Such an extraordinary change from a year ago. I typed back, wouldn't miss it. Tell Dad not to overdo the saffron this time. As the sun began its descent behind the Manhattan skyline, painting my empire in gold and shadow, I reflected on the question my mother had asked me a year ago in the garden. Was I happy during those 10 years of silent success? The answer was still complicated. But was I happy now? With the truth exposed, the pretenses gone, the family reconnected on more authentic terms? Yes. Imperfectly, complexly, authentically, yes. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Rivera? The development team is ready for you in Lab 3. The next generation security protocol demo is prepared. On my way, I replied. The empire continued to grow. But now it grew in daylight, with witnesses and collaborators and family who could see and acknowledge the truth of what was being built. Some victories are measured in dollars and acquisitions. Others in broken patterns and new beginnings. The greatest success I had learned was having both. As I left the boardroom to see the future my team was building, I passed the company mission statement engraved on the wall, words I'd chosen in that year of transformation. Security isn't just what we create. It's what we ensure, the freedom to build without fear, to connect without compromise, to succeed on your own terms. A mission born from 10 years of silent success, now spoken out loud for anyone ready to listen. Epilogue. The annual Rivera family gathering was no longer held at country clubs or backyard barbecues, but rotated between our homes, a democratic approach to a tradition reborn. This year it was my turn to host again. Not at the Hudson Valley estate where the truth had detonated like a bomb, but at my new home, a brownstone in the city, purchased not for its opulence but for its warmth. A place designed for connection rather than impression. As I welcomed each family member, I marveled at the transformations a year and a half had wrought. Uncle Mark, once dismissive of my computer hobby, was now enthusiastically describing his community coding program for seniors. Cousin Tina proudly showed off the prototype of her medical device, seed-funded by the family trust. Even my father had changed, not just in his attitude toward my success, but in his definition of what success meant. He'd stepped back from his firm, focusing instead on work that aligned with his original passion for law as a tool for equity and opportunity. As we gathered around the dinner table, a custom piece made by a local artisan rather than an imported status symbol, I felt the difference in every interaction. Where once there had been competition and performance, now there was genuine interest and support. Where judgment had reigned, curiosity now flourished. A toast, my father said, raising his glass. To Sophia, who had the courage to build her own path, and then the generosity to help us find ours. Glasses raised around the table, but I shook my head. No, I countered gently. To all of us. For learning that success isn't a fixed point or final destination. It's the courage to define it for yourself, the wisdom to redefine it when needed, and the love to celebrate it in others. As the evening progressed into comfortable conversation and genuine laughter, I slipped away briefly to my home office. On the wall hung 3 framed items in a row. The first, that small industry newsletter clipping, the first public mention of my company. The second, the Forbes cover that had blown my decade-long secret wide open. The third, a simple family photo taken 6 months after the revelation, all of us still adjusting but truly trying to see each other clearly. Past, disruption, reconstruction. The arc of a story I couldn't have planned but wouldn't trade. My phone buzzed with an incoming message from Diana. Urgent, potential acquisition target in play. Board needs decision by morning. The empire still called. Business waited for no emotional resolution, no family healing. But as I typed a quick reply and returned to the gathering, I realized I no longer had to choose between the two worlds. The woman who built a billion-dollar company in secret and the daughter who longed for genuine connection had finally become the same person. Complete, integrated, and moving forward, no longer defined by what she was hiding, but by what she was building in the light. No more secrets. No more silence. Just success on my terms, witnessed by those who mattered most. And in the end, that was the greatest achievement of all.